John van Dussen. So John is someone I know personally, that I've played personally. Not gonna say we're besties, but I definitely do appreciate the lad very much, and I do like him. And he did give me the favor of giving me some notes. They're quite extensive and long, so I'm not gonna try to read them verbatim, but I did go over them to help give us some context as what John's doing over here on this side of the green, of the Great Green, by playing the Greenskin. So John's actually very known for playing Tyranids for the most part. I think he was either top 3 or #1 Tyranid player in the world for like the beginning of the edition. I can't remember exactly. If I'm overhyping you, sorry, John. But nonetheless, he likes to peek over with the boys sometimes. And so he was at the Forgefire GT, where he took Tactics Brigade out for a run. And let me pull them up real quick, but let me drop some of these other tabs I got, because I got too many tabs open. I got too many tabs open. What's chat going on right here? Yeah, diverse unit choices here. We're looking at knobs minus the feel no pains. Yeah, they don't feel no pains. Hey, your knobs can have feel no pains, boy, right? Knobs can have feel no pains. All it takes is a pain boy. All it takes is a pain boy, and you too can have a feel no pain on your knob in comparison to the Leagues of Ultan little dudes. It's so funny because I didn't really realize how close to Berserkers those knobs were, like in points and everything, just how exactly close they were. So let me pull this up. He was at the Forgefire GT 42 player event. Shout out to Gary. We can see the guard making their way up here with that Wesley dude with up here with them guard. Look at that 4 100s. So John did end up losing his first game, and I know some of you are like, "Oh, he lost his first game, automatic submarine." Da, da, da. I understand that, but I actually am the one who pushed him to kind of still reach to give me his notes because 1, I respect his gameplay. 2, I was actually interested in how he ended up losing and his first game. And 3, I just simply like notes. So if I can get notes from someone, I do. So here we are. Shout out to our sponsors, the Baron of Dice, as they helped us do our Waaaghtaktiks dice. So shout them out. Check them out in the description. 5% off in the discount because nobody likes taxes. And shout out to Baron of Dice. They allow us to do our paint competition. So thank you very much to them. Now, with that being said, let's take a look at his first opponent and this loss. Now, it's funny that he actually ended up losing. Not funny. Sorry, John. Surprising to me that he ended up losing this, considering this is his army. Tyranid is his army. But Fred Foreman is a quite potent player. So let's take a look at his list. Invasion Fleet. Now, most of you would know, and you can let me know if you agree. I've seen so many Orc players losing the Tyranids, and I've seen it being quite a difficult matchup for Orc players in general. Something that I mentioned when even with the changes were coming out and everything like that. And that's something John himself says when he's going into this list. So we have 2 units of Broodlords and then a Hive Tyrant as the Warlord, 1 Gargoyle unit, 2 10-man units of Hormagaunts, a Biovore, 2 Exocrines, 2 Gene Stealers, 2 Lictors, 2 Maliceptors, a Neurolictor, and then a Tyrannofex with Flesh Boar Hive. I'm pretty sure that's their version of the Flamethrower. Yes, right? I'm like 99% sure of that, but I don't want to be wrong because I've said wrong things on streams before, and then I just feel like checking it. So, with that being said, as for John's notes, the flesh boar, that acid print, let's say flesh boar hive. Oh no, it wasn't. See, that's what I get. That's why I'm glad I checked. It wasn't the flamer. So the flesh boar hive is sustained 1 twin linked, but it's 24 inch range 24. 20 shots hitting on 3s, strength 5, 0 AP 1. So it's just a stupid volume of shots. Kind of interesting because normally people bring one like the acid spray. So I'm not sure about that, but it is what it is. That guy's just a big old piece of meat. And then we have Maliceptors. So Maliceptors here are a big factor as to why Orcs can't simply YOLO into Tyranids. So Maliceptors, T11, 3 up armor, say 4, pinful, and 14 wounds. I believe this was Invasion Fleet too. That means they also get a 5 up feel no pain. Let me think. I believe it was Invasion Fleet, right? Yeah. So it means they have access to 5 up feel no pain when they're in their synapse range. 14 wounds, and then you see they also have a data sheet ability that within 6 inches of this model, you subtract 1 from the hit roll, and if you're below have strength, that enemy unit is, then they subtract 1 from the wound roll as well. So you can't really YOLO into these guys, as well as where are those little dudes at? The Biovores. So the Biovores can drop their mines, and then the mines make it so that you can't advance through a range of them. Now you can activate them by getting close to them, and you can shoot them to kind of get rid of them, but they do mitigate your movement as an Orc player. You really hate to see something that doesn't allow you to advance. Mind you, then you have Lictors. Lictors are like the bane of Snickrot because they just eat Snickrot in a 1v1 won. Not that he doesn't have the data sheet to kill them as well. It's that they just get to fight first, so it's really annoying. And then you have Neurolictors, which is actually kind of like the linchpin of their list. As when you fail a battle shock, you get +1 to wound against you for everybody that targets you, so if you're within range of him. So when the enemy wants to kill you, they'll take the Neurolictor, get close to you, and then they'll have Exocrines and everybody shoot at you with the +1 to wound. Mind you, he has these Gene Stealer bricks, which are normally just used to scout up and then run into you and hit you with dev wounds and kill you. So yeah, and let me see what his notes, wrong thing right here. His notes actually were saying they were quite long and extensive. So let me pull up his list real quick. Where is the note? Oh, here there. Oh, thanks. It says it's not responding. From what I remember though, from what he was telling me in this matchup, from when I read it before I pulled it back up, is that one, he felt like this was already a difficult matchup going into it based off certain things I've already said. As for what they have a hard time with as a whole with orcs is how cheap their monsters can be, as Tyranids can be, how Shadow of the Warp can turn off our go turn. Oh, and he also just told me, I read back and looked, he said the Tyrannofax had a rupture cannon. It wasn't that weapon I just said it was, which makes more sense. So at least he can actually kill a little bit of stuff, that he can actually kill some vehicles and such with that rupture cannon. Nonetheless, they usually like to use that as a big thing of meat. So he said that for this, he felt as though that he felt pretty confident because he knew NIDS, but he didn't feel confident about his own utility of using the orcs since he didn't have too many reps into them. He did say that he didn't really love seeing the Gene Steal, or sorry, that he didn't really hate seeing the Broodlord and the Gene Stealers because he personally doesn't find them to be too potent. That doesn't mean they're not potent, mind you guys. If you ever run into them, running into you with dev wounds and killing you is horrible. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't play with them. It's because he knows how he would not make use of them and make them get wrecked. So one thing to be important here is that in his deployment zone, for the most part, he put 2 trucks with Burna Boyz and tank busters, and they went on the flanks to hit the outside firing lanes. He said a big unit of Gitz and a small unit of knobs were usually more eccentric and located inside of trucks, and then the big Git unit was usually in the back for safety and to react to opponents' opening moves. The Grots would be on the home objectives, 1 Stormboy unit on the board for turn 1 secondaries, and 1 a deep strike. Check out how to use 3 units to use. One of those units is Orc units that you're using wrong. I mean, Stormboy units, excuse me. And that's one thing I always mention. Running Stormboys, usually put 1 in reserve, 1 on the table. And then he said Lootas were either in the home ruin or in reserves. And then the other knob units were usually on the board as well, and then 1 inch away from the wall. So interesting for him as you look at this list is even though he has 4 trucks, he can't really cleanly fit everything inside of vehicles, and nor does he want to. Therefore, he takes advantage of reserves, and he takes advantage of, 1, the fact that Lootas have long range. So a lot of the time people go, why can't I just bring all tank busters, or can I only bring all tank busters? One advantage is that if you have Lootas, you can take advantage of the long firing lane, which means you can leave them on the table and not put them in the truck. The tank busters really kind of need the truck to not only be safe, but to actually get up and get range. So it's cool that the Lootas help with that. They can kind of threaten the enemies. And then having knobs just be on the tables, he has to do more to punch with is pretty sick. Now, let me see. What was he saying about the trucks? Let me see. He had the big units of Gitz. Yeah. Okay, cool. Making sure I got that done. So what he was saying here is that for the most part, the mission was Mission O, Terraform, Crucible Battle, and then Stalwart. He said he did his standard deployment of the Lootas on the table, and it was layout 2, so it wasn't too much staging for the trucks. He said he kept threatening the natural expansions and ended up walling on turn 3. He kept stuff inside trucks to stop it from getting hurt from Shadow of the Warp when he could. He did end up killing the Hive Tyrant, but he didn't hold his natural expansion. And for the most part, the reason why he also ended up losing this game was because he clocked out and actually clocked out. And at that point, the Gene Stealers were able to move around the board safely and kill him and end up swinging the game at the end, causing him to only lose by, I think, about 4 points. So he said overall, the mistakes that he made in this game was 1, he moved the Lootas out a little too early. 2, he forgot to shoot the spores, which are move blocking him. And then he didn't properly layer his units out enough so to prevent multi-charges from the Gene Stealers on his expansion. So he had to create space, so more than 4-inch gaps between his units so that if the Gene Stealers charged something, they couldn't charge, pile in, consolidate, and then touch the objective after. because he said that also ended up losing him as well. Ultimately, he said that it was unhappy about that, and at that point, he realized that the chess clock was a big factor here. Now, that's something that I want other people to kind of keep in mind as well. Is that the chess clock does end up becoming a big factor and kind of becoming your opponent in this detachment, because you're taking a lot of orders, you're activating on a lot of little little units and phases. You're trying to shoot, you're trying to charge with these units. You have something like the Flash Gitz, for example, that are taking a lot of time as well. Therefore, that's something that he notes for future and something to keep in mind for the rest when we do the conclusion, is that this game, playing a nice tick for tat, kind of long game with your opponent, who's another skilled person who's playing a I'll trade body for points kind of army and trying to get a one game ability off on you, meant that playing to the clock ends up being difficult. And what other thing that keeps us motivated during these difficult times is shout out to Jody Smith for becoming a YouTube member. Whoa! To Mr. Jody Smith and his great wall. So thank you very much. You get stuck in, lad. Now, from there, John learned he needed to be on his P's and Q's for his time clock. Therefore, he moves forward, getting in the rest of his wins. So we move on to the second game, where he goes into Raven Guards again. And these guys are playing a weird version of First Company, which is some Terminator captains, librarian, lieutenant with combi weapons, and then Shrike, an intercessor, impulsor, ballistas, a brick of blade guard, infiltrators, land raiders, reavers, a big brick of 10 terminators, a 5-man terminators, and then a 10-man brick of vanguard veterans with a jump pack. As for what he says, make sure my notes don't collapse here again. Goodness, my notes collapsed last time, guys. Just tell you right now. He said pretty much the Rockets just demolished most of the stuff on this list. As for giving the tank busters +1 to hit and them having blast, just really decimates the Terminators or the Blade Guard veterans. One thing that people always talk to me about is like what's going on between Dread Mob and the Tank Busters, or Tank Busters and the Tactical Brigade. The fact that Tactical Brigade can flex Tank Busters into being anti-infantry units is a really big difference. I promise you that. So don't just be weary and just look at it and go, well, I can sustain here. It's equivalent. It's not equivalent simply because the math says that. It's the fact that one, you can actually focus down enemy elite infantry and not just wishing for sixes in that case, which ended up being a factor here. Another thing that he said here was right away, just based off the pressure and the fact that his army wasn't really trying to go toe for toe, because he knew that once it was exposed to get with tank busters, turn 2 ended up being rough for him. And when he rapid ingressed some of the Lootas that were out of line of sight and then brought them into line of sight to shoot at units that were on objectives, they just picked up those units pretty nastily. And then when the Blade Guards ended up not popping a truck with combat, it meant that they were just kind of out in the open, ended up getting killed. Boom, that was it for that. So yeah, it's not really that, not really that tank busters are the end all be all, like the only way to win. But in matchups like this, where people are bringing a lot of elite infantry, which happens a lot in the meta right now, you find a huge advantage in having them. Then we go on to this third game, which ended up going into Black Templars. Now, this ended up being, let me get rid of this real quick. Down some of these dash sheets. So this ended up being his teammate. So he actually was familiar with this list. I'm familiar with this player as well, having had to play Sarah before, but familiar. So game 3, he said was his highlight because he was happy to see his teammate, and he always likes playing with each other. One thing though that was interesting here was this list was a little bit off the meta, and he had done some similar kind of practice reps, and he knew what his weaknesses were and realized that he had to play a little bit more off the wall. So we have an ancient and Terminator armor, lieutenant and combi weapon, a tech marine, a unit of assault intercessors, 2 5-man units of assault jump pack, a ballistic dreadnought, infiltrators, 2 redemptor dreadnoughts, 2 scout squads, a 1 big brick of 10 terminators with thunderhammers and storage shield, vindicators, and the whirlwind. So the whirlwind was the real kicker here. And then those Terminators end up coming with 5-up feel no pains. Coming with 5-up feel no pains. So he realized that he just really wanted to stick those same units that we were talking about earlier, the Lootas, the Knobs, Tank Buster units that kind of people were willing to put on the table on other matchups. In this one, he put those on the table. He put everything inside of trucks that he could, so it couldn't get indirect fired as he would want it to be. And then let's see. Yeah. So what really ended up throwing the game for him in his favor favor was that on turn 3, he drew when it's time for his wall, he drew no prisoners and overwhelming force and just steamrolled through the enemies. Now the opponents did tank a ridiculous amount of damage on those Terminators because they had 5 of feel no pains. Because the secondaries and the amount of damage that went off already just meant that there wasn't enough stuff left over, and ended up again, because the clock ended up being a factor for him again as well, that he realized the opponent was making mistakes, but so was he. And then in the end, he did enough damage that it didn't really matter. And then he ended up pulling that through with a 89-point win in a close game, even if it didn't show in the points necessarily right away. And I believe him because as I've been playing more with the Tactics Brigade, I've been having the same issue with the clock, especially if I bring more mob-sized units. So if I bring 20-man units of boys, I start bringing Zod. I start bringing stuff that requires more activations. I start having to roll more dice, more units of Flash Gitz that also have a bunch of dudes giving out more orders. It starts getting weary on you, and that's something that he was feeling out because he didn't get a bunch of practice games in with this detachment before going to this event. So great job there, John. Regardless, they move on to his 4th game. So his 4th game is into Chaos Knights. Again, like I said before, and I'll say again, if you're going to any sort of event, RTT to a GT, be aware that you're probably going to play into some variation of Knights, kind of gatekeeper-esque kind of army, easy to collect and put together, fun to have, fun to crump people, and you should just be ready to kind of deal with it. So here he has a Knight Tyrant, followed by a War Dog Stalker, with 3 brigands, followed by 3 carnivores, 2 units of 3 units, 4. Oh goodness, I messed up. Sorry. 2 10-man units of cultist mobs, followed by 2 20-man units of cultist mobs, and then 2 3-man units of Nurglings. So I do appreciate that he has a bunch of bodies instead. I think that's pretty sick. I think it's pretty sick because typically they do just run out of bodies in that case, so they can't just be on the field. Don't know if 20-man units are the answer there. But I do have notes, thank goodness, because I was like, I'm not even exactly sure how this thing would actually work. My notes better stop hiding from it. Here it is. Okay, so he said the guy was playing against with the new cult. I know it's literally just for some reason Word is fighting me right now during the stream, guys. But the guy was running the new cultist, obviously Chaos Knight detachment. And he said this mission was Purge the Foe Crucible of Battle on layout 6. He says he went first, which he was worried about on Purge. He was very conservative on turn 1. He chose intentionally not to score established locus to avoid giving up the primary. And then he said he played conservatively all the way until turn 4, where he just kept grabbing his 4 points for holding and then trying to deny him from getting more primary. They stayed even on primary. Then on turn 4, he ended up calling his wall, surrounded his Castellan with 15 knobs, and that broke his back and turned the game for 21 points. And that's because that's how it kind of ends up going when you're playing one of those Purged or Scorched, where you have to kind of tit for tat on primary and kind of send it on turn 4 or 5, taking advantage of who ended up going first or second. If you ended up going first, then you got to really wall on turn 4 to really kill them, and not allow them to score all their primary at the end of the game by just having that mid table of oops, I'm still alive, I get to kill you, and then I get to stand on objectives and swing for a big 15. So I thought you did a really great job there, and yeah, and he said it was a great feeling for his army to have that many options and be able to have Lootas into something like those big bricks if they want to stand on objectives and just punish them. Then we move on. Oh, let me pull up. So then he got a 93-point win there. Then we move on to his last game, which is against the Adeptus Custodes. So Adeptus Custodes are something else you got to be super aware of if you're going to events. They're everywhere. A lot of people are easy to collect them. They're going to bring them, and they're going to bring the same amount of the same data sheets over and over, and they're going to be very effective. And that's why people want to do it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so, let me pull up his notes for this. It was the Triple Blade Champions. Oh, this was the Shield Host, by the way. Triple Blade Champions. 1 is a Custodian Guard unit. 3 5-man units of Wardens, 2 Prosecutors, and then 3 units of Venatari. One of them is a big 6-man unit. Boom. All this is all throttle, all go on this list. If you don't know, Venatari can rapid ingress for free. That means they can do 3 rapid ingresses on the same turn. I guess technically 4 because they can all do it, and then they can just choose someone else to do it too. So it gets quite ridiculous and funny. So he says he was curious about this matchup because previously before it ended up being a little bit more of a difficult matchup, but because the new detachment and him having tank busters, he felt like that this would go different, and it did. This mission was taken hold and tipping point on layout 1. One thing he said is the fact that there wasn't any like you know, for example, if just firepower, his trucks could just freely move around the field and stage up. And when the wardens went to move, he was able to punish them with Lootas shooting and tank buster shooting. The Lootas did end up getting some some, I don't know how, but he got the high ground, so you get plunging fire. I don't know how you got that. Maybe he disembarked into a transport. So yeah, cool on that, and he was able to kill a couple wardens in that way. One of the things that he said here was that because he was chipping him damage, that the custody player on turn 2 just decided, I have to kind of commit since I have no shooting. Mind you, he also wants to ingress all those guys, so it's really overwhelming kind of firepower there. But when he kind of ran out, he ended up going only into the chaff because John ended up kind of screening him, knowing John ends up knowing how to do that with Tyranids a lot. So I'm sure he made like a nice bubble of, you can only charge stuff I don't care about. And then in that response, he ended up killing a wall himself, shooting and charging him right in front of his face, and then cleaning him up. So yeah, love to see that for John's last win of getting 100 points against the Custodes. And then as for John's last notes, because he did have a last thought here that I was looking at, and then I went right past. He was saying he thinks it's really good right now. It really goes good goes good alongside the new data sheets, but really primarily the tank busters, because it fills a role that we were lacking before. Being able to really punish and focus down not only vehicles, but those elite 3-wound enemy infantries are a huge hit. Dealing double duty damage onto monsters and vehicles like Tyranids, for example, is a big factor. He knows himself, being someone who was very, very, very proficient in Tyranids, means that was a big factor. He said the fact that you're not as reliant on the wall means that you can work outside of the wall and then really just swing the momentum of the game when the wall goes and bring the combined arms factor. He said, yeah, and he said just the fact that it's so diverse into a bunch of different data sheets is his really big strength. So let's take a look at his list one more time. He had the Big Mech and Mega Armor with Mech Captain, triple Big Mech with shock attack guns. One of those was the Lootas, 2 of them were tank busters. 3 war bosses, 2 of them were all 3 of them were with knobs. He had 2 5-man units of battle wagons, 4 truck, 2 Burna Boyz to go alongside those SWAT team for the tank busters, 5-man unit of Flash Gitz, 10-man unit of Flash Gitz, 1 Grot. And really, he said that the Lootas were a bit hit or miss as to their actual ability to kill, and the fact that you had to use them on objectives was a little bit annoying, but that they're still very, very effective what they do when they're on objectives, and the fact that you have long range firepower is a good, really good factor. Other lists also ring a lot of Lootas, so if you're bringing Lootas instead of tank busters, don't be weary. I'm sure it'll be really effective as well with your shock attack guns. Everybody likes it as well. It's what we were using before tank busters came out. And then if you don't have Breaker Boyz, go ahead and use knobs, because a lot of people already are using them, even though Breaker Boyz already exist, pretty much because of the cost differential. There are other people this weekend that we showed off, that we didn't get to show off, that were running the Breaker Boyz and tank buster combos, and they didn't have it, as clean of success as they would have hoped, I'm sure, for running all of the new data sheets. So we see here John with his 4-in-1 list. Thank you very much for the notes you get, and shout out to you and your great whoa be a cunning get, and check out our new order markers that are in our store. So shout out to you Gits being cunning. Help you guys get all the orders set on the table nice and clean for all you Gits to get stuck in. If you enjoyed the clip, check out the full video here. If you'd like to see more tactics, click here.
Let's get stuck in, lads!